We'll have an intermission for 1 second. We're just putting lights out on Liz Lamere. We could still talk though.
Okay, cool, Johnny.
Uh, so how long? I was. This is it. Okay, so we'll ask more questions when lights out is over.
Fighting shadows in the night, and on around the endless fight. Let your hands go, release the doubt. You know, you know, you know, you know, you know, you know. The groove, go all night till the lights out. Fast jazz, straight ride, stick and move, keep it tight, keep it tight. Fight for your life, fight for your life, fight for your life. Till lights out, lights out. Please flame on, please flame on. Might makes right into the night, into the night. Slick moves on the loose side. Slick moves on the loose side. Ripped inside out.
Yeah, it is like that. Like I had a
Lights out. Till lights out. Till lights out. Till lights out. Fast jazz, straight up. Stick and move, go all night. Lights out. Slick moves on the loose side. Ripped inside out. Ripped into the night. Endless fight. Keep it tight. Endless fight. Till the groove. Endless fight. Take the night. Stick and move till lights out. Go all night till lights out.
Woo!
Oh, you want to
So that was Lights Out. This is Johnny, part of Uncensored. So I wanted to ask you, how long did it take to compile songs for Keep It Alive? Like, was it songs that you had previously?
I worked very much in the same manner that I would work with Alan. I just would tell Dante, hey, you know, suddenly I had a captive engineer. We had set up a recording studio at home, and he had some R&B, young hip hop and R&B kids coming in recording with him. So suddenly it was just the two of us, and I'm like, oh shit, Dante, can we make some music, you know? And he engineered, and I just pretty much did the music one track at a time each day. And then I had already, from the time Alan passed, I started writing. Because for me, the hardest part, we always just made the music on the spot in the studio, right? There was nothing preconceived or anything like that. But for me, the hardest part is, what am I going to say? So I had been writing and like just journaling and whatnot. And then with everything that was going on during COVID and all that kind of stuff, I just started pulling words. So after I would just do the music one day, the next day I'd jump on the mic and just start freestyling vocals. I had no idea what I was doing because I had never really sung before. So I would just do one performance, and then I'm like, okay, let's go again. And I would do like something completely different, and then I'd do a third thing, and then I'd just like, now bounce it over to me. I want to hear all the vocals of this whole cacophony of crazy vocal, and I'd just listen. And the next day I'd come in and I'd just say, okay, that we're doing this, because you have it on the grid, right? So became so much easier to just kind of edit my vocals that way. Now, right after I finished this one, I did an album with a hip hop artist, and I did all the beats. I did like 9 songs. He came in, and in a week we literally did all the vocals, just trading verses. And so then he's got on his a whole different style, right?
Who was the artist?
His name is Sly Cat. So, and that's something that has not been released yet. But yeah, it's called Unwitnessed Protection. It's really cool. In fact, I was going to play a track from that as well. We could.
Intermission. We're all cavemen with the digital in the digital world. You're like, oh no, don't let Johnny talk. You're like, oh God, no. Meaningful, yeah. Well, also, I have another question, which I think is kind of important with the hip hop thing. I think that suicide is proto hip hop, and I think that, like, they kind of are like you know, it's the beginning of using kind of analog gear and beats to kind of create what inevitably became in the late 70s and early 80s, like in certain parts of New York and Midwest, which became hip hop, And I think suicide doesn't really get the credit that because the attitude with punk was there, you know what I mean? Like Alan Vega and Martin Rev both had like a very specific New York kind of like stream of consciousness, like attitude, bringing the streets. What was it like? I remember reading it was like, we're gonna bring the streets.
We're not here to entertain
You,
Coming
yeah.
off the street expecting to be entertained.
Entertain
We're putting the
streets
right back in your
face, exactly, which I always thought was like the coolest. It's like, we're gonna put the streets right. You're getting off the streets of New York at that time, from what I know through my parents and my friends. It's like it was a fucking nightmare, and then they would be pushing the street right back in your face, and freestyling the vocals. So that's very inevitable. Like, that's more hip hop to me than punk. The attitude was punk, but I feel like the beats and everything else, the stream of consciousness, was very, proto hip hop, I guess. But yeah, what do you have to say about it?
No, and at that time, you'd walk out in the streets and you have the hip hop mixtapes being played on the boom boxes, and Alan's like, "This is the future of rock and roll." I mean, the sounds that they're getting are new. And we would go into the studio. I played drums in like punk bands and whatnot. He's like, "You come into the studio with me. You've got a sense of rhythm. We're going to just go at these effects machines. We're not going to read the manual. We have no idea what is supposed to be done, and just start turning knobs and pushing buttons and create sound, and then we bounce that sound onto another track, and then run that through something else, and on and on and on." And that's how we created 9 albums together. Actually, probably more like 25 during the course of that time, but 9 were released. Because I would say, "Hey, Alan, we should really put an album out because I want to go." And then we'd tour in Europe, where there's an appreciation for stuff that is innovative and new, and the rest is history, so to speak.
Yeah, France was like,
Oh, big time.
they loved Suicide.
Yeah, and they loved Alan. Alan had his biggest hit with Jukebox Baby in '83, and that was just so minimal. If you listen to that song, it's so minimal, but it was like a rockabilly. He wanted to do something a little bit different from Suicide, and he had that hit, and that's when he got assigned to Elektra Records, and now you have to bring in the big producers and the session musicians, and meanwhile, he's back at the Gramercy Park Hotel where he lived at the time. This is about the time I met him. And he's got all these effects machines linked up on the floor. He's creating his own. Because back at the studio, they're like basically taking over and trying to do that album, Just a Million Dreams, which actually is going to be reissued.
I have a question. What was his reaction? Like, obviously he got signed to Electro, and that's great. But like, with having people come in and wanting him to do certain things, what was his reaction to that?
He used to say it's beautiful. They sign you for this special thing that you have, and then they proceed to try to beat it out of you, right? Because and someone like a Rick Ocasek, who produced Suicide, he had the opposite. He's like, "Rick wants to be the artist like me, and I would like to have Rick's resources so I could do whatever the fuck I want to do." And nobody can, say like, "Well, if you really want to have a commercial success, you need to bring in this producer with this sound." And I think he kind of tongue in cheek, like played along. Let's see what they can really do. And then of course they really didn't do anything with it. And by that time I had met him, and I had gone to law school and I studied entertainment law and whatnot. And I'm like, Alan, they gave him like a $250,000 advance to do. This is back in the '80s when that was a lot of money, right? And then they blew it all on like coke and the recording budget and all this on his dime. It's being recouped against his royalty rate, right? And so I said, shit, we could produce albums for like, I don't know, 5 or 10 grand at the most, and then we'll own the masters and we'll license them, which is what we proceeded to do for the next 30 years.
Which is also what I feel like a lot of people are starting to realize, like what they should do, like in music and bands, like not going the label route and just doing everything themselves and owning.
Yeah, I think also what a lot of people don't know is that like suicide was like very disliked in the early 70s. And throughout the 70s, like from people that like who are friends with my dad, or people who used to go to CB's or Max's or Mercer Arts Center, like there was a good 8 years of what I think people don't know is like them being like the complete outcast and being completely hated.
Alan used to say we were more punk than the punks, because even the punks hated us.
Yeah, even the punks hated them. So I think that there's something to say about like in the 80s there was like a time there became a time where he was getting offered a lot of money, which I think is like very interesting.
Yeah, that was different when he suddenly did his solo thing, right? And then that it was a very different dynamic.
Because there's all this like now of course like he's passed away unfortunately, and like there's all of this resurgence of this stuff, but at the same time it's like it's funny to hear people who were actually there speaking to them being like, suicide, like you like that band? You know what I mean? Like older guys who I know now who are like, I can't, it's just interesting to see how times like.
Well, it's almost like each new generation has discovered them. It keeps coming around, because what they were doing was so far ahead of its time that now you can't really shock anyone now. There's nothing you can really do that's that extreme. But then it was like sacrilegious. You're going to have a band and you're not going to have drums and guitars and all this kind of stuff. So, and the other thing people didn't realize is that Alan started out as a visual artist. So he was early on, he started the Project for Living Artists, which was just a space kind of like Andy Warhol's factory, where artists could just come. He was basically the janitor. He lived there. And he was making, he studied art, painting at Brooklyn College. He was an astrophysics major, and he transferred to art, his major to art. His parents were really pissed off, but that's a whole other story. But he started making sculptures, just dragging in found objects, garbage off the street, making piles of lights and wires. And in walks Ivan Karp, because he hears there's this space where all these artists are, and people are trying to get shows, and he sees this pile of garbage on the floor. He says to Alan, how soon can you have a show? Now this is Ivan Karp, who discovered Andy Warhol and had the OK Harris Gallery. So it started then, and Jeffrey Deitch, who's considered one of the top art dealers in the universe, has said Alan is one of the most radical visual artists that he had ever met, and still to this day. So he made history in not only music, but in visual art too, doing these crazy light sculptures that then he turned into crosses on the wall. So at about the same time he was signed to Elektra Records, he did a huge gallery show with Barbara Gladstone, where now Julian Schnabel's buying his light pieces, and big collectors are buying his light pieces. So he suddenly turned the corner, where he went from being almost killed when they went on tour with The Clash. They were throwing axes at them. They were, spitting and all that kind of stuff. But they were throwing shit at him. That's why Alan would start just breaking bottles and cutting himself up and be like, oh, you think you can scare me, motherfuckers, and then they're like going back in waves,
I think that what I think is also important to mention about, since we're on the subject of Alan Vega and suicide, he was a lot older than a lot of his the punk community, and he came out of the 50s. Elvis, like all of that stuff was like, it's like future 50s, especially his art. Gene Vincent, Roy Orbison, Elvis, fucking, there's so many of them. And I think that that's like really kind of like I don't know, it's just an important thing to know about his artistry and his sculptures, because there's a lot of 50s kind of like very cultural, iconic Catholic. Like it's a very
He was
very
fascinated by the
Brooklyn,
church.
very Brooklyn thing too that I see. You know what I mean? Like even like just the content or like the words that he uses in his songs. It's like I'm listening to somebody yell at me who's part of my family. You know what I mean? But regardless, you know, he's a great artist. Do you have any questions?
I was just gonna say that I wonder if, every generation discovering suicide, Alan Vega, there's like such a need for it because you don't really have that anymore. Like you're saying, like nothing is shocking anymore. So I feel like that's all I was gonna say. Just a comment on that.
Yeah, and I think he was able to kind of tap into some universal themes. You know, he was a very much an old soul. He was kind of connected with, I don't know how to describe it, but I think that kind of resonates with people because it's very, sometimes the hardest thing is the simplest thing, right? And he was a minimalist at heart, so if you listen to some of the suicide songs and even the lyrical content, it's very, very simple, but it's very profound because there's meaning there. And he used to say that like the hardest thing to do is something really simple because you can't just be throwing a lot of shit against the wall and hoping something is going to stick.
Do you want to introduce the track that the collaboration that you were doing that we were supposed to?
So this back in, here it is. So there's an Alan Vega album called 2007, and there's a song called Cheap Soul Crash. So what I did is I had some outtake vocal of Alan's. So Alan is doing a little bit of a three-way collab with me and Sly Cat on Crash Cheap Soul.
And this is unreleased.
This is unreleased, but BMG publishes it, so it's cool.
The greetings come.
Prequel of El Cheapo, Frico, you a creepo, lethal people.
Pleasure dealers with juice to buy. Hotline numbers.
Evil shall equal zero. Cathedral steeples been repo.
Dilly dealers. Crash cheap soul. It's all about the juice.
Shotgun to your peephole. Dirty pigs murder El Negro. Crabs in a bucket, no seagulls. Posters now heroes, reload.
Shadow sex. It's clean and mean. Slick wet fun. Whisper. Whip thrills. Dance.
Jam,
Finger slam.
wham, bam.
You got the scam.
Jungle,
Jam.
hunger,
Hang.
cherry,
Tang.
East Cape,
Sissy Drake.
take a flake.
You got this. You don't have to sell your soul for the juice. Quick rips. Cash in the chips. Beating the slips.
Cheap soul,
Hotline numbers. Slick wet fun.
cheap soul.
Savage the night. What price glory?
Give me juice from that needle. Overdose your cerebral. Vertigo. Your position is fetal. Cradle to the grave, mob deep past feeble. You're evil. Keep smoking that diesel. Cancerous cheap souls crash, no chemo. Down below.
Easy money, dripping blood. Shedding tears over graves. What price glory? Crash cheap soul.
The greetings come. With deadly whispers.
Crash cheap soul.
Cheap soul.
Puking cheap soul.
Cheap soul. Crash.
Cheap soul.
Crash cheap soul.
soul crush. Yeah, like purified sleaze. Yeah! Who should we kill, 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 kill? Yeah!
Wait, I want to hear about your performances in Europe. Yeah. That was unless you don't want to talk about it.
No, I do.
Okay. How? So that was your first time performing. How did it go?
For me, it was amazing. Like, I had so much fun. I have never been like the lead person, front and center on stage with my own music before, and it was incredible because I think first of all, it was in France and then in London. So it was mostly France, where I had performed with Alan for many years. So there was a little bit of a background and history there, but there were a ton of young people. And in particular, there were a lot of women who came back after and wanted me to, sign the album. And I had my LPs there, and everyone seemed to like really be into it. So I think there's like for me, I'm trying to be, a role model, or kind of the women empowerment type thing is important to me. But it was so much fun, I didn't care. You know what I mean? It was like, fuck it. You know what I mean? Like I'm just going to go out there and have fun. People are, oh, you don't have a live band and da da da. I had most of the tracks, because this stuff is done in the studio, right? I don't do it with a band. I make all the music myself, and then I just add a little bit of effects. So I had like a little effects machine, so I'm playing a little bit of noise and whatnot with it. And I also had Dante's girlfriend, Allison Zhao. Dante came and did my sound, my son, and then his girlfriend came, and she was sang in a choir with Dante for like 10 years. So I had her, I'm like, I don't want to be completely by myself on stage. So she was dancing and doing some really beautiful kind of ethereal kind of choral-like vocals, just that really, I think, complemented what I do. It was a nice dichotomy, because I tend to be a little tough, and she was kind of floating. It was nice. It was so much fun. Yeah, sorry.
You also said that you played in punk bands. You were a drummer. What bands were that?
Well, it's nothing that you would really know. I mean, I grew up in Boston. So back when, the drinking age was like 18, I used to sneak into a club called The Rat, which was kind of like the equivalent of CBGB's, but in Boston, and see like the Dead Boys and, Jonathan Richman and Devo and, a lot of bands coming from New York to Boston. Never saw Suicide there, although they played there, because that's where they met Rick Ocasek, who produced them years later. And, so that was at around the time of the Cars and all that kind of stuff. And then, so I played in a band with my boyfriend, and it was called Backward Flying Indians. We played like at college, parties and stuff. Nothing significant, because I really thought, I went to law school figuring I'm going to be financially independent. I can take care of myself, and I can do music just for fun. For me, playing drums was like an outlet. I was very athletic. I grew up with 2 older brothers. We're always like out playing sports. I was a ski instructor. I played varsity soccer in college. So I was always just very athletic. So I thought drums, I love music. And then when I came to New York, I had a band in law school called Moral Turpitude. And then I answered an air. I'm working on Wall Street as a corporate lawyer representing these crazy investment bankers who were doing junk bond offerings. I know. It's like Michael, it was a total double life. Michael Milken, who was like arrested for insider trader, he was like our key client. and we're pulling all-nighters. Alan thought it was insane. He's like, this is he also thought that, you're a drummer, you're a Wall Street lawyer, you're a drummer, you're a Wall Street. It was crazy. No, I could write a book about you talk about the Me Too movement, the shit that was going down in the 80s on Wall Street was insane. So, but anyway, so during that time, here I am answering an ad in the Village Voice, and I became a drummer in this band called Snub, which stood for Sergeant Slaughter's No Underwear Band, and would play at CBGB. So I'm like in a meeting, and there were not many women who were doing corporate law at the time, right? So I'm in a meeting with like 12 guys, and a couple of the investment bankers were like, hey, when's the band playing at CB's again? This kind of, and the partners would be like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, she plays in a band, we pay her a lot of money to do what she's supposed to be doing here. So I was living kind of a double life. But again, I wasn't trying to be like mainstream music thing. It was just it was a creative outlet, which is great. And then when I met Alan, it was the same kind of thing. We joked, oh, we're not going to play music together. That'll spoil the relationship or whatever. But then he said to me, oh, come on in the studio. Let's start, making some music. And, so that's it.
Yeah. That's wild. I would love to see a photo of you from that time period, like in the Wall Street.
And I had a hoop in my nose, but when I was 16 in Boston, and I had never seen a white woman with it, I had seen the Indian women in the subway with the little studs in their nose, and I went to an all-girls Catholic high school.
Me too.
You did.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so we can bond on that. So I pierced my own nose. The nuns were horrified.
I had a nose ring too.
This was back, because I'm a lot older than you are, though. This is before white girls had hoops in their nose. So the dichotomy between my daytime with a little three-piece suit. That's why when Alan met me, I have like combat boots on, and I had a spike in my nose. He's like, "You're a Wall Street lawyer." He's like, "What is going on here?"
I feel like that would be a really good like promo photo or something, like of you in the suit.
Yeah.
Bring it back, yeah. Wait, were you part of any like clubs in all girls school? Like, were there nuns there? Like, what was the vibe?
It was totally nuns. Yeah, I had 12 years of nuns. Yeah, they were insane. I think that explains a lot of.
Yeah, you're like, I do not want to talk about this. Yeah. Do you want to pull up the song for Dante?
Sure. Okay, so it's On Time. The song is called On Time by Metro Boomin.
Listen. Every story need a superhero and a villain. Now, introducing Metro motherfucking Boomin, nigga. Yeah. They pray for the day that I lose it, but God gave me the power to use it. It may wait in a while, but I'm on time. Yeah. I glide through the rain and the fire. Take no days off, can't retire. Know you waited a while, but I'm on time. Oh, I'm on time. Hey. Know you waited a while, but I'm on time. Oh, I'm on time. On time. Know you waited a while, but I'm on time.
You know what they say? If young Metro don't trust you, motherfucker, you better run.
All the villains is grinning. All my niggas is winning. Must I remind you one more time? Must I remind you niggas? But I gotta tell you niggas again. We gotta show you niggas again. We gotta, hold on. Pete.
I'm done. I am done apologizing. I am done being persecuted for my strength. You people, should be thanking Christ that I am who and what I am because you need me. You need me to save you. You do. I am the only one who possibly can. You're not the real heroes. I'm the real hero.
Listen to this station. There was a time when you could dream. There was a time when you could dream. Now, it has become a crime to dream.
Yeah, man. Yeah. It's a dum-dum dealer. And he's got his badass music. And he got some deadly plans. Yeah. Whipped into hurting. Yeah, there's some slicing and dicing happening, baby. Yeah, so please, disease. Hey! No remorse. At the cross. At the cross. Oh! Yeah! Yeah, don't forget that, baby. Yeah, he's the mercy man. Yeah. Down on the Dujang, right? Yeah, the Dujang, right? Oh! Hey, you know, everybody here is chewing on gun barrels. Yeah, you know, everybody here is doing the craze. Yeah, doing the craze. Yeah, doing the craze. Oh! Hey, mercy, mercy, you amaze. Yeah, you the champ. You the champ of the bad side, side. Yeah, you nobody's listening. Yeah, nobody's listening. Nobody's listening. On the Dujang train. On the Dujang train. Oh, mercy man, mercy man. Yeah, got his badass music. Yeah, the Dujang Krang style. Yeah, shooting for alls for Slop City. Slop City. Slop City. Yeah, they're fanatics with death devices. Yeah, wrong tubes for man beast. Yep. Everybody's here. Everybody's here. Yeah, everybody's here. Right here. In the Dujang right. In the Dujang right. In the Dujang right. In the Dujang right. Oh mercy. Oh mercy. Oh mercy. Oh mercy. Oh mercy. Oh mercy. In the Dujang rain. In the Dujang rain.
So that was Dujang. That was Dujang Praying by Alan Vega. And I love this story because Bruce Springsteen named that song. It's one of his favorite songs that he listens to in Mojo magazine, the UK magazine. But my favorite part of that is Alan went to see Bruce in the Devils and Dust tour when he was doing Dream Baby Dream as the encore. And he's sitting there and he, between, I guess, the opening act and Bruce coming on, Dujang Praying comes up on the speakers, you know, in the auditorium, whatever it was huge, whatever the stadium was. And he turns to his buddy who he's there with and he says, "This is really good. I like this shit." And he goes, "Alan, that's your song, Dujang Praying." And I was like, shit, I guess I got to start listening to my stuff. He's like, "This is really good." And I'm very proud because I did the music. So I was just like, thank you very much, Bruce. Anyway, thank you for having me. This was really a lot of fun.
Where can people listen to your music?
I'm on all the streaming, Liz Lamere, and I'm at Lamere Liz on Instagram. Thanks.
You're listening to Radio Bonita.